our nervous system has a huge impact on our blood sugar. If we are in chronic fight or flight mode, our body is going to be pumping us with tons of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. This means if we're in fight or flight mode all the time, our body is going to be pumping us with cortisol and adrenaline. These stress hormones are actually called glucocorticoid hormones, meaning that part of their job is to raise our blood sugar. This is so we can get up and fight or we can flee from a threat. But oftentimes we're not running or fleeing from this threat. We're just sitting at our desk or sitting on the couch answering an email. We're not using up all this glucose that's been put into our system. So it starts to really impact our blood sugar and hormone levels. Sometimes this can lead to high blood sugar, and oftentimes it can also lead to blood sugar crashes for many people. Oftentimes we don't realize that we are stuck in this chronic fight or flight sympathetic state. And unfortunately, past traumas can drive our nervous system to sort of be stuck in this state. Today's guest is Raj Jana, and on the podcast, we have an incredible conversation about our nervous system, past traumas, beliefs, and so much more. I hope this episode will be so helpful for you to understand your nervous system and how it impacts and relates to our blood sugar. Let's dive in. As a former reservoir engineer, 40 under 40 entrepreneur, and media host, Raj Jana is passionate about building businesses and spreading messages that shift consciousness on the planet. His first company, JavaPresse, a lifestyle brand in the coffee space, has helped over 500,000 individuals use coffee as a vehicle to achieve more daily fulfillment. Raj's work has been endorsed by Daymond of Shark Tank, featured in Forbes, Buzzfeed, Huffington Post, Entrepreneur Magazine, and various other news outlets. But seeking fulfillment, Raj sold a major part of his company, JavaPresse, in 2019 to focus on his mental health and relationships. Despite investing heavily in modalities like plant medicine and various forms of therapy, nothing stuck. I think a lot of people might relate to that. He realized most tools only treat surface level stress and not the root cause, so transformation was short-lived. Frustrated with the inefficiency and ineffectiveness of existing mental health resources, Raj and his partners created Liberate, a human transformation company that helps people use precision emotional analytics to improve mental health outcomes. Liberate's emotional lab reports help everyone from cancer patients to people struggling with anxiety to gain a clear understanding of the psychological factors contributing to their stress, while empowering them with the tools and community-driven support to create measurable change. Raj currently splits his time between US and Costa Rica, where he is now, and is an avid adventurer at heart. And as a seeker, Raj explores the edges of spirituality, healing, and personal development on his critically acclaimed podcast, Stay Grounded, which reaches thousands of people in over 70 countries each week. Raj, welcome to the Unlock the Sugar Shackles podcast.
Woohoo, I'm here. Good to see you.
Yay. Yeah. From your bio, it's pretty obvious why I wanted you to come on this show. We connected at Dragonfly, where I heard a lot of your story that you told on stage. And I was really fascinated because, like I shared with you offline, a lot of the clients that I see, and I think just everyone in the world, is struggling with so much stress. And as we know, our nervous system is so intricately linked with our blood sugar. And so we can't really separate them, because if we're eating all the right things and moving and all that right, yet we have all this stress and all these other things that we maybe don't know the root cause of, we could really be stuck in a place where we can't fix our blood sugar, and then other things are going wrong in our life and our health. So super excited to bring you on. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. All right. So I want to start with, tell me about, what is a reservoir engineer and where did you get started, and how did that transition happen for you? What is it that brought you to this space of diving into the root cause of mental health?
I'll do my best to compress it and shorten it, because there's lots of stories in between. So graduated college with a petroleum engineering degree, started working in Louisiana for big oil companies, and was basically telling them where to poke holes in the ocean, didn't feel good about my life, was stuck in a cubicle, was in a long distance relationship at the time. Just everything was like, what am I doing here? I read a book called The 4-Hour Work Week by a guy named Tim Ferriss. And it kind of blew my world open to like this whole world of online learning and digital entrepreneurship. He was retiring every 3 months, and it just kind of blew my world apart. And then I started kind of just dabbling with little side hustles on the side. I started reading business books, and lo and behold, about 3 months into that journey, I then launched a lot of different side hustles and trying different things. But my like sixth or seventh side hustle was my coffee company, JavaPresse. Started out as just me selling things online. I didn't know anything about anything. And then 3 months after I launched our first product, I had a mentor who died of a heart attack 3 months before his retirement date. And kind of just shook my worldview again. I was like, man, I like really don't want to be in a cubicle. I like really don't want to be doing this. I remembered after he passed, his wife came in the next week to clear out his cubicle, and she had just retired, and it was just this really sobering, sad moment. So then I just like worked really hard and started selling a lot of coffee, and on that path, we did really well. Like 7 months later, we were doing really well. I was making more money from that company than I was from my full-time job, but I was miserable. And then I met a mentor who sort of taught me to kind of look back on my life and look at why I was working so hard and try and find meaning in what I was doing. And that's when I realized just how big of an impact that person's death made on my life. And from there is kind of when Stay Grounded, which is my podcast, was born. I stopped really selling coffee, and I started slowing down and using coffee as a way to like really connect with yourself. And so that kind of like started my, if you would, like my spiritual journey of like just slowing down, looking for the flower, like just not being so hustly. And then that really grew the company. And then in 2019, I burned out again because I clearly didn't take my own advice. I had my podcast, I was doing great, but I burned out again. And I really doubled down on focusing on my relationship at the time. I was in a 9-year relationship and not proposing, and it was like, what are you doing, dude? Like, you know, like it was just, I kind of buried myself in work because I didn't want to look at all these other parts of my life. And if I look at my habits at the time, like I was drinking more than I'd ever been drinking. I was carrying a lot more weight. Like I was trying to work out, I was trying to lose weight. But I just wasn't a healthy human being. And and I couldn't see this at the time, but now in hindsight, I could see just the role that me not wanting to have hard conversations with my significant other at the time, not wanting to, like, burying myself in work. Like, there's all these parts of me that were running in the background that were creating stress and bad habits. And back in 2019, I had a very powerful experience. I went and had my first kind of psychedelic journey, which kind of opened up my eyes to just what was like. It's like I put on colorblind glasses for the first time. Have you seen like videos of those like old people who like haven't seen like color,
yeah.
and then all of a sudden they put on colorblind glasses and they're like, whoa, and they're just like I can see everything.
Yeah.
That's how I was after that first journey, and it opened up a lot of good and a lot of beauty in my life, and it made me realize a lot of things about myself, but it also brought my mind and my body back in connection. And I didn't realize how disconnected I was from my body and my feelings and my emotions. And, you know, there's a lot we can go into that around just how we get so disconnected from our bodies and our emotions. And so I didn't realize this, but at the time I was in fight or flight, constantly in fight or flight. And after that journey, you know, I went through a really significant period of having challenges with intimacy and my last partner in that 9-year relationship. Now all of a sudden I'm in my body. I can feel traumas. I can feel all these things that I didn't want to feel. They were all open. And I remembered, you know, there was a period of my last relationship, or that relationship, where I had a hard time being intimate and getting aroused. And I couldn't actually like get hard, you know, for lack of a better word. Like it was just really difficult for me. And that was like the big sign. Like my body, it was just like, and I bought all the supplements, I bought all the red light therapy machines, and I did all the biohacking stuff. I've been an avid biohacker for years now, and nothing was working. Like nothing was working. And that's when a dear friend of mine told me, hey, you should go like see this hypnotherapist and see what's going on, because I feel like you just need to calm down. Like you're just freaking out and it's doing worse for your health. And so I went and saw a hypnotherapist, and after a few sessions, it became really clear that I had I just put a lot of pressure on myself to be perfect in relationships, and when I wasn't perfect, I would beat myself up, and then I would have these stories that I'm not worthy of love or pleasure, and it would just create this whole... And it was the first time I got to really see just how linked my mind and my body were. It's like these beliefs about myself, these beliefs about love, these beliefs about just worthiness were actually creating a physical response, which was my me not being able to get aroused in bed. And it was creating these habits of me needing to go and drink to like soothe my stress. And like, so it was like that was like the light bulb moment of like, oh my gosh, like how did I miss this? And then that was about in 2020. And then, I then at that point ended up separating from my partner of 9 years, because clearly like my body wasn't broken, my mind was, and it was this very big eye-opening moment to like, okay, maybe I just need to have a hard conversation. And that started my mental health journey, where I started going to therapy and doing lots of different types of resources and flying all over the place to try and like regulate my nervous system, try and create a balanced nervous system, try and feel just a state of relaxation, because I don't think up until that point I even knew what that was. Like, even if I was relaxing, like even if okay, let's just say this, like I go and do the meditations, I go and do the breath works, I'm still doing. So there's this like obsession with going to do the next thing, find the next trick, find the next tool, and that alone was creating stress. Like I just couldn't get to a state of like just calm and stillness and being. And I tried everything. I was looking at everything. And that's when my partners and I started wondering, like, why is it so hard for guys and girls like us who have all the resources in the world to actually get to a state of relaxation? And it really just brought up a whole realization really for all of us around like, okay, none of these tools out there are actually addressing the root cause. They're all just addressing a symptom. I feel anxiety. Let's make the anxiety go away, instead of asking ourselves the deeper question, why is there anxiety to begin with? You know, nobody's born with anxiety. It's not like you come into this world anxious. Like if I think of babies come in pure. They have life experiences that mold their nervous systems, their sense of safety, their sense of belonging, which then create the way that they navigate stress, the way that they're regulating. And it was just this eye-opening, that kind of like the more we researched, the more science we invested in, the more we looked at this, it was just like, wow, like we're not really taught as a culture how to look for the root causes of our mental health challenges, of our emotions that we don't want to feel. We're not really taught how to feel our emotions. We're not really taught how to bring us back into a state of regulation. And that's when Liberate really started coming into form, and we started looking at the health communities, because, you know, health is one of the biggest eye-opening, you know, kind of, I mean, for me it was at least like erectile dysfunction, call it that. You know, I didn't know it was just me having performance anxiety. I thought it was literally like me being broken. But like that was like the biggest eye-opener for me to start looking at alternative methods for health. And that's really what we wanted to start inspiring in different health communities. Hey, like you can take all the supplements in the world, you can track your numbers to a fanatical level, but if you feel unsafe, or if you feel like you're losing control, or if there's scripts that are running in the background that are keeping you in a state of stress, it's going to be like pushing a boulder uphill. And that's where I felt so stuck, and I imagine a lot of your listeners also feel stuck, where they feel like they're pushing a boulder uphill. They're doing all the right health things. They're just like making little changes, and I think this is the big elephant in the room that, you know, we just haven't been talking about, and that's ultimately why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I want to bring more awareness to this and create tools and resources for people to, begin that journey of just going inward and learning to love their little nervous systems in the way that they need to be loved.
I love that. There's so many great nuggets. I was taking notes as you were speaking, because I feel like there's so many just call outs in that, like the pressure to be perfect. I can certainly relate to that. And we talked about this at Dragonfly, that being an Enneagram 1, I have this high sort of inclination towards being or trying to be perfect, and not called out for being bad. The call out about how you were burying yourself in work and how you were very busy. And so it's this avoidance, that we have so many patterns of avoidance, and is it avoiding sitting with feelings? Like, why are we rushing around? Like, there's a great book called Rushing Woman Syndrome. I know it's different than males, but in general, it's like that busyness. And that's one of the things that I see. If I'm rushing to get somewhere, that is one of the things that will absolutely spike my blood sugar on a CGM. So what are we avoiding? Why are we rushing around? Can you help unravel that?
Yeah, so I think this comes back to, why do we have a hard time just being?
Yeah.
Right? Like, why is it that we do so much? And I think doing is a function of being in our heads. Mm-hmm. Being productive, doing the thing, being active. And so the question is, why are we in our heads? Mm-hmm. And the thing that I've learned over the years and what we've seen in our communities and the research is, when we don't feel safe in our bodies, we naturally resort to our heads. And a lot of times from our lives, we may have experienced, whether it's childhood traumas or life adversities or And I'm not just saying when I say childhood traumas, I know that sounds like a big thing. Like, childhood traumas aren't just like the big T traumas, like the physical abuse or the sexual abuse, although those are also very impactful. The CDC actually defined emotional neglect and patterns like people pleasing to be trauma responses. So like, it's like these little T traumas that we don't really give a lot of weight to are also kind of governing in the background. So like, to me, all these little T traumas, whether we had an amazing childhood and we just accumulated all these little T traumas over time, or we had a traumatic childhood, all of that lives in the body. And when we sit still, we're confronted with it. We can feel it. And because we don't have the tools, or we don't know how to move it or regulate it or release it or process it or let it go, we're not taught this as children. If we had an emotional, this is like part of my vision, just with the work that I do, is like being able to have an emotional resiliency program taught in kindergarten, where we're teaching kids how to like regulate their nervous systems from a young age, because then trauma doesn't have to bind in the body. It can, like, you don't have to be so, like, it's like you don't have to let it impact you in that way. And so that's why I think, well, it's not what I think, it's what the research also suggests. Like, there's so much literature out there on like how trauma, big and little, just accumulates in the body. And if we're not used to moving that, it can feel very, very threatening and scary. And this is why I think we're so avoidant. And this is why I also talk about this, because I don't feel like we need to be avoidant. I think there's a lot of fear of feeling. There's a lot of fear of being seen. There's a lot of fear of kind of going into our past. There's a lot of fear, and I'm really wanting to encourage more curiosity, because it's just your body. Your body there's nothing to be afraid of in your body. And I think that's a big part of shifting the narrative around health. Instead of the tool being outside of you, what if the tool was within you? What if the ultimate healing tool was actually already here? It just took a little bit of courage. And so, long-winded answer, but I hope that answered your question. It kind of went in a few different directions.
No, that's great. So how did you know that you were in fight or flight? You said that you realized that you were stuck in fight or flight, and then from there, how did you get into your body? Because I have a feeling this is something that I sort of struggle with, because I'm very much in my head, very much a people pleaser. I'm feeling real called out by a lot of these things that you're sharing, but in a good way, really resonating. And so how did you know you were stuck in fight or flight, and how do we get into the body, and what does that mean?
Well, I think the first step is just recognizing that you're like kind of in it, right? So it takes a level of awareness. In our like our emotional lab reports and programs that we run, like we always start with just tracking your triggers. And when I say a trigger is like those moments where you have that kind of less than neutral feeling. And it takes practice to just start becoming aware of when you're in it. And this is why it's like community, having a coach, like having some type of somebody to like help you begin this journey of just being more aware. It starts there. Because if you're not, like most of us are not even aware that we're in fight or flight.
Yeah.
Right? Like this is one of my, I remember reading this quote a while ago and it really struck, it was actually calling me out, like directly around like, you know, the obsession over looking for a root cause is actually a fight or flight response. Like you're like, what's the root cause? I'm gonna go and just, I gotta find the root cause. I gotta.
Yeah.
Your mind is literally trying to find a sense of control. That is a maybe let's break it out. It's not just fight or flight. There's fight, flight, freeze, fawn. There's so many types of nervous system responses, and not just a fight or flight response. Like when I say fight or flight response, I mean like an overactive nervous system response. That's ultimately what these behavioral patterns are. They're just overactive nervous system responses that are scripts that were learned in childhood. And these scripts told us that, hey, if we behave this way, we can be safe, we can be accepted, we can be loved. And so if you think about little children just stored in our bodies, and like the children also, though, run about 97% of our operating potential, which is our unconscious mind. So think about like this just big little child that's literally running the entire show. And so first step is becoming aware. Second step to me is just building a practice of naming those responses as, hey, like this is like my scared little child. Like that's what I like to call it. It's like, hey, here's my little kid right now and he's just freaking out. Little boy inside of Raj, like I just need to like hold space for him, hold him. And then it's a process of like listening and building that relationship. And that's the long term. I know, I wish I could just give you a tool like, oh yeah, do the breath work and then do the meditation and do the thing. And there's many tools like that, right? There's breath work, there's meditation, there's hypnosis, there's so many amazing tools that can help you get into your body and regulate. And I think the most lasting impact can be made by you just learning to name those parts of you when you become aware. And instead of trying to shame yourself or to like change yourself, just practicing listening to like, okay, like what do you need? And really reparenting that part of you that's in a state of fight or flight. And these are all skill sets that you can learn. This is what we teach in our programs. This is like the type of stuff that, because this is like foundational now, right? This isn't just, like I said, like the tools or the symptoms, but learning this skill is a root cause focused approach of getting to know your nervous system and becoming intimate with yourself and building that trust with those parts of you that may have been hiding for a really long time.
Yeah, that's so good. So what would you say maybe for some people who may be having trouble recognizing even just that awareness piece of how these fight, flight, freeze, fawn responses show up if it's not like, okay, we're like fighting with somebody or like running out the door, like that very like obvious, but like what are maybe some covert sort of modern things that we might see in like, the average person nowadays that's sort of showing that we may be in one of these nervous system states?
So one that might be directly applicable to your audience might be cravings. Mm-hmm. Right? Like when there's a craving, if you can slow down enough before you actually reach for the food that you're craving for and just breathe, there's likely an emotion. That emotion and that right there, if you can pause right there, just as a craving, the second you go reach for the thing that you know is going to spike your blood sugar, that you know is going to do the thing, it's like right there, that's a nervous system response. And so like being able to, this is why like, I really feel like food and our relationship to food can be such a powerful mirror for this type of work, because it is like truly your body's telling you, hey, I don't feel safe. Go get the food that's going to help me feel safe or comforted or feel good. And that's something worth listening to. So that's one very concrete example. Another one is like relationships to people. Like when people trigger you, or you feel like you want to get into an argument, or you want to prove them wrong, be right, or let's say you're the opposite side where you don't want to fight, you actually just want to like go and kind of sulk and kind of shut down. These are all forms of nervous system dysregulation. You either learned that shutting down and not making noise is what kept you safe as a child. It's what got you love as a child. Being obedient and listening to other people is what got you love as a child. Or maybe you didn't get a lot of attention, and screaming so that your voice is heard is how you got attention and love as a child. Whatever your childhood was will manifest in your intimate relationships. That's just the way it kind of works. Because, again, your intimate relationship is kind of mirroring mom or dad in a lot of ways. And that's what we've seen in our community. So that's another way. With work, a lot of overworking, busyness, staying productive, trying to just being like kind of creating work for yourself, avoiding, there's a whole world. I mean, there's so many that we can go into as far as procrastination, boredom.
Can you talk more about the procrastination piece? Because I feel called out on this one.
My intention wasn't to call you out the whole time.
I know, but I'm treating this as a therapy session. So
okay, great. Well, okay, just want to say this: I'm not a licensed therapist. Please do not take anything here as therapy. I am somebody
it's a learning
who's doing
opportunity.
I'm doing my own work, and I can share what I'm seeing in our communities. Procrastination is a form of resistance, and it could be a lot of different sources, right? Like it could be a fear of finishing it, and then what? Mm-hmm. What are you going to do? Are you going to sit still again? Or is it better to ruminate on the fact that you have something to do? Mm. So it's like procrastination can be, there's so many roots here. This is why it's it'd be nice for you to get an emotional lab report. We could probably find all
I'd love to do it.
The roots there. But it's tough. There's just a lot that can go into why you do what you do, right? Because for me, like procrastination in a lot of ways is I actually don't want to. It's changed for me over the years. Now I have healthy procrastination, which is like, oh, I'm working on something I actually just don't want to be working on, and that's really like a message for me. And then there's unhealthy procrastination, which is like, I'm not getting this thing done because I'm afraid of how it's going to be perceived, and I'd rather and I don't think I'm actually the person that's supposed to be doing this thing, and it's not going to look good if I finish it, so I'm just going to like avoid doing it for as long as I can, and that's just not healthy. Mm-hmm. So it just depends on where you're at, and it's funny. This is like, there's no one route. It's just
right.
It's whichever, so whatever.
So there's different causes for the different behaviors. Like, there's different reasons why someone might exhibit a certain behavior. Is that right? Totally. I mean, like I reach for, like my comfort food is Indian food. I don't eat Indian food unless I'm emotional. I just don't. Yeah. I just don't. I love Indian food too, but when I'm like not emotional, like I just don't crave it anymore, because like it's pretty carby and there's a lot of like, it's not the healthiest food, so but it's like when I'm sad, it's like, I want comfort food. And so there are like, but another person may not have that relationship with food, and so it's very unique. And that's what's so fun about this body of work, as you're working on health, like being able to layer in the awareness of why you do what you do and where your decisions coming from and how do those decisions impact your health. It kind of brings in like just another layer of awareness. And I think with that awareness, at least in my life, I've been able to really accelerate a lot of health improvements, because I'm not just addressing the surface.
Like underneath the behavior, there's an emotion, there's a thought, there's a feeling, there's so much happening. And taking the time to become intimate with that, I think, is a really beautiful way to create lasting shifts and help you get to your goals faster.
Yeah, I love that. I really like the idea that you were relating this back to childhood and how we get these belief systems and sort of these patterns that we tend to repeat. Can you kind of unravel that a little bit more? So how does that work?
Yeah, so if you think about, so between the ages of 0 and 7 is when we're most impressionable. It's when our prefrontal cortexes have not been developed yet. So the prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain that's making all the logical decisions. This is like the adult. When between 0 and 7, you don't have an adult in your brain. You have a scared animal. Let's call it a scared child. This child cannot fend for itself. It just cannot. It needs parents. It needs, and so if the child, so like basically at that point, the parent is the sole reason that the child is surviving. Now, if you think about it from that standpoint, depending on the way you were parented, depending on how absent or how present, how available or unavailable your parents were, it can create a range of belief systems about what you need to be, how you need to show up in order to be safe. Right? So if, let's say, and I want to just name, like, it's very irrational because there's no rational brain. There's no prefrontal cortex. So it could be like I go to the grocery store, mom leaves me in the aisle to then go and pick up milk and just tells me to stay there. I don't listen. I go looking for mom. I can't find her for 10 minutes. I then create this belief system that mom doesn't love me. She leaves me by myself. Nobody loves me. That's like imprinted with the emotion that the child was feeling. And if mom doesn't know that this is what the child is feeling and thinking, she can't and won't soothe. Right? Like it's like so there's a gap there. So this child has this internal experience. This internal experience is creating belief systems that are locked in stone and stored in the body. The feeling is stored in the body, and the feeling and the memory is stored in the body, if you would, and the belief is in the mind. And so now, as that person grows older, and now this person's 10, and let's say there's a sibling, and mom chooses that sibling and spends more time with the sibling, now I might feel, look, mom doesn't love me. Nobody loves me. Nobody cares about me. I'm the least important child. Great. And then you go to 16, and now you're dating and you're meeting guys or girls or whatever you're doing, and now all of a sudden that's hard, and that then further cements this belief system. So this is how, in our research and what we've observed in our communities and what we've seen in our emotional lab reports, this is like how we're seeing the psyche being developed. And so those early childhood experiences, whether they are traumatic or not, have a very important influence on the way that we perceive the world works. And so there's just a lot there. I can go, and if there's something that's you're curious about, but like that's like the overarching idea of this is why, 0 to 7 is like, it's when you're literally don't have a brain, but your limbic, your crocodile, archaic brain that just wants you to survive is collecting as much information as it needs to be safe. And I like to think that the information sources are not that great.
Yeah, that's good. It's helpful to keep in mind. So knowing this emotional piece, we have these patterns that the nervous system is going to keep sort of repeating these patterns. Why do we repeat them? Because it's like just default, or does it make us feel safe? Like, why do we keep repeating this stuff?
Yeah, so it's a beautiful question. So the mind, if you would, doesn't actually want us to be happy. It just wants us to be safe.
Okay, good to know.
Well, so let's look at it in the realm of relationships. Like, there's so many people out there that kind of find themselves in the same types of relationships over and over again. Well, why is that? It's not that you don't want to be in a happier relationship. It's not that you don't feel like you don't deserve it, right? But there's something about this type of relationship pattern that you've already survived before. Therefore, why would you take a risk on something new? So your unconscious mind doesn't want to take a risk on something new, which is why if you find something that's actually what you want, you then start self-sabotaging, and you run, and you create all the noise to find something wrong or do something, and that's because so this is like a very tangible example of how your nervous system literally is reliving a memory. It's reliving a memory, and that memory right now is, and the way that you responded in that memory is what kept you safe. Or there are belief systems around your worldview which you're currently alive inside of. Like, you're alive. Why rock the boat? That's like the logic I like to think of our subconscious mind. Like, why rock the boat? And it takes us taking certain practices to rewire the unconscious mind to be more in alignment with what we actually want, which is love and health and money or whatever your goals are. Like, this is so in a nutshell, they are default, and it's to keep you safe. And I remember when somebody gave me that example early on, like, it was it was really triggering, because I was repeating relationships and relationship patterns, and it just slapped me across the face. But then at the end of the day, it also gave me a pathway to realize, like, okay, after I got out of my 9-year relationship, I was like, all right, I'm not going to date for like 6 months. I don't even want to go on a date, because I need to like rewire everything that felt safe in that dynamic so that I can actually have a chance of finding what I really want. And I think the same goes for just about anything that you want. And it's the process of unraveling so that you can get clear and aligned.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like I do some work with that with my students in Blood Sugar Mastery, because a lot of them come in and their story and that what feels comfortable to them is that everything I try doesn't work, or like I always fail. And so they have these beliefs and these patterns that are really running the show. And so we have to do a lot of work behind, like we do, I mean, and maybe I can learn more, tools from you, but this idea of like visualizing this new person of who we want to become, and going into like why we have these beliefs, and then starting to redevelop trust in ourselves by saying, like, by creating new little tiny habits, and saying, oh, I said I was going to do this thing. I did this thing. I'm starting to feel better, and really focusing on what is working, and like starting to trust ourselves, because now we can be trustworthy because we said we were going to do this little thing and we did it. And so we're now building up evidence towards the fact that we are a person who can be consistent, or we are a person who can prioritize our health and who will get healthy. And so we're trying to like rewire those beliefs, because they really, really keep people stuck.
They sabotage health.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you don't feel worthy, you're going to act in accordance with ways that, and this was a really big eye-opener for me. Like, I realized, like, in that same vein of, if you're so used to feeling shame, or if you're so used to feeling these feelings, your nervous system actually, it's almost like it's addicted to those feelings. So,
because it's comfortable in that, because it's safe.
Comfortable,
right?
because it's safe.
known.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's known.
Yeah.
It's safe. So, like, not experiencing those feelings. So, like, if I just keep screwing up my health, if I just keep dropping the ball, I'll just, to my mind, I'm like, it's good. Like, we're good. Wow. You getting healthy is super scary. Mm-hmm. You being happy, actually joyful and peaceful, is really confronting. And this is why it's so important to just recognize the mind and build awareness of, and build an intimate relationship with those parts.
Yeah.
Right? Like, parts therapy is one of my favorite tools. That's one that we teach inside of our communities, to like really teach you how to build awareness of those different parts of you, Like, how do you build a healthy relationship to your shame so it doesn't rule your life? How do you build a healthy relationship to your anger so that it can be expressed in more authentic ways? How can you learn to receive the messages in these feelings without it being something that's ruling your life? And it does take time to kind of rewire that. But once you do, then like when you experience a feeling, it's like you can catch it and be like, oh, this is me going down that spiral again. It's not true. I love the work you're doing, the visualization, the positive beliefs. That's so important, because that's like, once you become aware of this side, like what do you do? Like you go back to the other side. And you're like, no, this is who I am. This is what I want. This is how I act. Mm-hmm. And it takes that reminder and community and you know, and so I imagine you're doing a lot of this in your programs, in your communities. But like that's the path. It is like that path of being aware of these parts of you and then having a new part that you're really aligning to.
Yeah, love that. So let's talk more about we talked about like the mind and all these things that are in our nervous system, but let's shift to how this is impacting our physical health, as you were talking about before. So what are some things that you see with people? I mean, you know, there's obvious, well, I wouldn't say obvious, but maybe there's some general things that maybe people know about how stress and, you know, being in a fight or flight state might impact their physical body. But how does this show up for us in that way?
I mean, it's so complex. And I mean, so we know that, you know, stress creates inflammation in the body, right? So if you have any level of stress, it could be physical stress, emotional stress. I mean, I like to think of shame and anger as toxins. Ooh. The same way you would like an environmental toxin, like shame's a toxin. So if shame is in your body, it's a toxin that's creating an environment that doesn't allow for vitality to exist, right? Like, so it's like an energetic toxin. If you think about shame, judgment, these emotional states, like when you're in that, you're not thriving, you're not expressed, you're dim, you're slow, you're not. And how might that express in a behavioral symptom? It might mean lethargy. It might mean that you're not functioning at the highest level. So like there's more of an esoteric, right? What we've seen in our communities, we do a lot of work with different health communities and work alongside a lot of different practitioners and health coaches. And one of the things that we've noticed is that when like the mind and the body have a link, that's inextricable, right? Like now what we're also starting to see though, in certain types of patient populations, there are trends. So in cancer specifically, you know, we're starting to see very clear trends of 70% of our cancer patient populations have similar belief systems from childhood, which is really eye-opening, you know, because it's like now it's starting to suggest that, okay, certain types of beliefs, certain types of emotions, certain types of feelings actually are correlated with certain types of disease states. So I'm not one to say that trauma and emotions and beliefs are like the root cause of health challenges. Like that would be silly. And what we are starting to see in our populations are just there's an inextricable link between health and mind and emotion. Like there really is. Mm-hmm. Whether we want to call it, you know, having belief systems that create stress, and then stress leads to inflammation, whether that's how you want to look at it, or stress then leads to immune function being deteriorated, like whatever, however you want to look at it, it's, you know, and then there's obviously Eastern medicine that actually links specific diseases to specific organs. No matter how on the scale of science to woo, where are you? Like, it doesn't matter where you are. Now there's enough research to really suggest that, you know, you taking specific actions to address the root causes of your dysregulation has a far more lasting impact on your health than just treating the symptoms. Like, if you're stressed out and just going to sit in a meditation, that's a symptom reduction. But there's still a belief system, there's still an emotion, there's still a lack of safety that's not being looked at, and I think that's what's creating a soil in which plants are hard to grow.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like in order for plants to really thrive and grow, you need to actually tend to the soil. And that's kind of how I look at the mental and emotional. It is like the soil in which everything else grows on top of. And if your state is in a constant state of fight or flight, and in anything, it could be even in, we've done a lot of work with fertility and looked at women who, if you're in fight or flight, how can your body create life?
I mean,
It thinks you're dying. It thinks you're dying. It's not going to create life. So you can do all the things to improve your fertility, but like if you don't address this very important component, anyways, I can go down a lot of rabbit holes here, but what I wanted to speak to is like, the mind and the emotion play a clear role, and we see it like in our communities. Like when you address this, all the other health things become easier. So whether it's doing this work then makes health easier, which then leads to health outcomes, or doing this work directly then leads to lab marker improvements, we've seen both.
Yeah.
In our communities. So I can't definitively say that it's one over this, but what we know is that doing this work matters.
That's awesome. So what is this emotional lab report you've been talking about? Because that sounds very intriguing.
Yeah, so the same way that you'd go get your, blood drawn and then go get like a breakdown of what's happening there, and then you might make changes in your life based on your numbers. That's basically what an emotional lab report does for your feelings and your thoughts and your beliefs. So we take you through a process of uncovering all of the limiting beliefs that are getting in the way of you experiencing the health goals that you desire, the relationship goals that you desire. And then we pair you up with precision tools and recommendations and curriculums to help you sort of rewire those and come back into a state of alignment with what you really want. So it's like kind of like the first step before you choose any of the tools. It's like, let's actually get clear on what's underneath the hood. And it's a really beautiful experience. It's actually like we give you an app and you get paired up with an expert on our team where we take you through like a deep dive process of just understanding yourself. And it's kind of like, the best way it's been described to me is the process of getting an emotional lab report is alone cathartic and illuminating. But the emotional lab report is basically like your tailored plan that's designed for you.
Yeah.
Based on your data. So
yeah, that sounds awesome, because I feel like that's where I start with my clients, with their physical symptoms. So why not start with these limiting beliefs that feel like they're at the root and they're, causing these patterns to show up in the belief systems? Like, why not start there? We have to start with uncovering that. You just told us that this is where the root cause of the anxiety is, or whatever it is. So I think that's brilliant. So is there anything more that you wanted to share about how Liberate works? Because it sounds really, really intriguing.
Yeah, I mean, like the process itself, once you sign up, you get a link to download our app, and we teach you over 10 days just how to track your emotions and thoughts and feelings. And then you jump on a call with one of our trained experts on our team, and we take you through a process of basically like taking you back in time to like uncover beliefs and memories and stories, and we do it in a really slow and smushy and safe setting. So it's like it's really, 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 it's one of my favorite things to experience myself. It's just like somebody's just holding space for you to like unpack your feelings. And then after that, you receive an emotional lab report with all your recommendations, and you get access to our free Mighty Networks community, where you get curriculums and live healing sessions, and we do a lot of demonstrations and workshops, and you basically get the resources you need to begin working on your mental and emotional well-being. And it's kind of like that's like the way it works. And then we have programs as well. If you like want to go really deep and fast, we have 3-month programs. But yeah, it's basically the resource I wish I had when I got started on my journey. Like I was spending so much time, energy, money trying to just feel better. And I wish somebody else would have just been able to remove all the confusion and give me like the most effective and efficient path that's designed for my psychology. And that's ultimately what Liberate helps people do. So we just remove the confusion, come to us, and we'll pair you up with like where you need to head and how to get there the fastest.
Love that. That's awesome. We will link it in the show notes and where we can get in touch with you as well. So your Instagram and anything else, your podcast. You told us stay grounded. Anything else we should know about where to reach you, how to work with you?
No, you can, Liberate is spelled Liber 8, and it's liberate.health. And so you can go there. And like I said, we'll send show notes or little links and codes and stuff over to Danny so she can put it in the show notes. And yeah, we'd love to have any listeners. And if anything I said kind of like stood out to you, or please reach out. You can message me on Instagram. I'm very responsive to just listeners and people who have questions or thoughts. So yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for what you shared. I feel like there's so many things that you just uncovered. I mean, I've been, in this world of trying to do my own research and my own, on my own healing journeys and spiritual journeys, and undoing some of the people pleasing and lowercase t traumas that I have from childhood. And it's a journey, and it's not, for me, I'm real comfortable in my head. It's not super easy for me to be in my body, but the idea of that, because it doesn't feel safe. Like, that's such a weird, it's like a new concept for me, that like it wouldn't feel safe to be in my body. So I thought that was really helpful to hear. What would you do? Like, any advice for that? Because that's like a new concept.
Well, if you notice yourself having an uncomfortable sensation, the first step is just to kind of come back to like reminding yourself that you're safe. Just even acknowledging that, like kind of speak to the emotion. Speak to it like it's a little child. And just mother her, really, truly, just being like, hey, it's okay here, and breathe into it. It's like, that's like the first step of really learning to kind of like create more safety in the body. It's your breath. Like hand in hand. It's like literally your breath has so much healing potential. And when you can consciously focus your breath on the sensation and the feeling instead of the story, right? Because it's easy to like, that's why meditation's hard for a lot of people, because they sit there and then like you sit and then you feel really uncomfortable and then you go into your thoughts and then you're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. This is why it's like, if you can just come back to the breath, and just start that relationship, that's how I'd begin. And then going deeper down, just the rabbit hole of, like I said, there's a lot of different tools depending on your kind of nature and your nurture and what helps you feel safe. And there's a lot of ways, but yeah, I mean, we'd have to dive deeper to know exact tools, but yeah.
No, but that's a great tip. And you recently did a Vipassana, was it a 10-day silent meditation retreat? I was going to ask you this off air, but anything you want to share about I'm sure it's, obviously you can't summarize something like that in, a couple of sentences, but any takeaways that you feel like you would be relevant to share?
Yeah, I mean, just for context, everybody, I did a 10-day silent meditation retreat where I just sat with myself for 10 days. It was one of the most confronting things I think I've ever done, and also really liberating and very rewarding. And I think for me, one of the biggest ahas I got to just see was how freaking crazy my mind is, and like how resistant even I was after doing so much of my own work to just being still. And I got to really see where my desires to go grab my phone or desires to go do all like what's actually underneath it, and why am I so active. And it's been a practice of me kind of like, I've gotten back and I've been really meditating, but like I've really been sitting with this whole thing of like, activity versus like action. There's a difference.
Ooh, yeah.
Activity is like me constantly being in this kind
Being
of
busy.
like, yeah. And then taking action is actually really a beautiful thing. Like I feel like it's more calm, it's centered. I know what I'm doing, where I'm headed, how I'm getting there. Like it's not like it's a different frequency, and I'm kind of tuning into that.
Yeah.
Still integrating. So,
Yeah.
it was a big one for sure.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Sorry for putting you on the spot.
No, it's cool. Like I said, like
Yeah.
I'm happy to, if anyone has questions about that experience, you can also reach out. I think I'm releasing a podcast this week on it, so we can go deeper. But
Awesome.
it's a lot to put in a few sentences.
Obviously, yes, for sure. Well, thanks for sharing, and I appreciate all those nuggets of wisdom and just things to be more aware of, because that's the first step. So that's
Yeah,
great.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me, Danny.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Raj.